Another day, another ride. Alright. You guys confident? To a 5 miles an hour in the breakdown lane in a scooter. I'm sure you've earned it, my friend. I'm sure you've earned it. So not a whole lot going on. Gonna schedule another day at the track in a few weeks. Maybe do a little more filming then. So I can say my oil filler cap, my Rizoma oil filler cap, that pretty blue thing, one of the multiple pretty blue pots this thing has on it. My last oil change, so I changed the oil after 2 consecutive track days. I can say the oil didn't, actually by appearance it didn't look that bad, but I don't know. Paranoia, OCD, whatever you want to call it. Maybe it's necessity too. The bike's in the higher RPM ranges for most of the day. It's running hot, it's running hard. I don't think it can hurt. That oil filler cap has a small O-ring that is supposed to enhance the seal of that cap against the actual filler outlet, and it was shredded. Basically it was just shredded. I think it just kept migrating up and down the threads as I screwed it on and pulled it off, and probably led to some friction, but either it was a breakdown of it itself that led to that happening, or the O-ring wasn't tight enough in the first place. But anyway, it's shredded. So just some feedback in those Rizoma pods. That's the only thing I've really experienced, but that's also the only pod I have to take on and off that's Rizoma on any sort of regular basis. So, you know, the world of O-rings is pretty intense. My father used to work for a company that made O-rings, and I used to work in the warehouse as a teenager. And you know, some of these O-rings, these small O-rings, you know, for aerospace or some other, you know, really high risk applications, some of these O-rings were over $1,000 a piece. I mean, they were crazy. I mean, just because they're designed for extreme tolerances. I need to get my hand in one of those things. The water wetter coolant issue. As I mentioned a few videos ago, I had some disappearing water wetter. I had multiple replies from people that said this is a known issue with the S1000R. I assume it's double R too. So what I did was I have, just the other day, ordered a new radiator cover. Hopefully it fits. It says it does. But after the last track day, I topped it off, of course, before the track day. After the last track day, the fluid was between the max and the min in the overflow tank. So it's about 50%. I lost some, but it's not the point where I gotta fill up in the middle of a track day, which would be really annoying. And I've been riding around at that level for a couple of rides now. This is my 3rd ride out at the same level. It's not leaking on under a regular application. It seems the track really sort of pushes it, so not too big of an issue. The most annoying part is taking the fairing off every time I want to put coolant in. I mean, it's not tremendously annoying by any means. It's just, it could be better. I mean, if they just extended that cap a little bit or had a mechanism to fill it. If you know you're losing it, maybe, you know, making a mechanism to make filling it easier. Just a thought. Then we have the Dunlop Q3s. And I'm getting used to this tire. It's certainly stiffer than the Diablo Rosso Corsa from Pirelli. And that it takes some getting used to. And now I fear that when I switch back, because I have a pair of Rosso Corsas at home just waiting, I fear that when I switch back they're going to feel soft. I'm sure they will, but you know, feel is never a bad thing. But these are great. I don't have any problem with traction. You know, when I was goosing it, at least at my skill level and under this application, yeah, I lost traction maybe once or twice in the track coming out of a corner, but it wasn't. It certainly wasn't anything profound. Also keep in mind I get this bike in road mode, so traction control is going to reel it back in pretty quick. So I really shouldn't be losing much traction at all. Always check your shoulder for the cop that's trailing behind you. Like that idiot I encountered a few weeks ago. So I'm happy with these Q3s. They certainly have some wear on them, but I'd like to quantify the number of track days for someone at my beginner level in number of or approximate street miles on top of that, so people can have some reference. You can also look on any website that sells a tire to get that information too, but a lot of these times you know if the people are accurately documenting. We're going to hit up Palomar Mountain today. Now it gets cold out there. You start getting a lot of ice in the road and snow on the side of the road when you get into December and maybe even November at times, but I think it's warm enough to avoid that, and while it's rideable, I'm going to go play a little bit. So issues I addressed with this bike at the track: obviously road use. Is more bike, even with this road and wet mode and the standard version, more bike than you could ever need. At the track, I think it's a different story. There are some limitations in your positioning, at least, you know, standard classic positioning in terms of leaning over and placement and tucking down and even absolute speeds because of the wind resistance when you get these long straights. So, but I don't think that's a big surprise to anybody. That's known limitations. Just going to the fun here. Of course, I got a truck full of pigs in front of me. I know they're hauling pigs, they are. So there's no limitations, but once again, this thing is still extraordinarily versatile. I think if I had a Harley before, I would consider the Double R. Certainly would consider it. Price is an issue too for that bike too, you know. Not that the price alone would stop me, but you know, the inevitability of a crash on something that costs 18 grand. I mean, what do you do with that? You know, it's a little strange, especially for a hobby. I mean, if you're racing and it's part of your career, it's a different story altogether. But if you're really like flinging a Double R around the track as a hobby, and if you're that wealthy, it doesn't bother you to crash your $18,000 to $20,000 bike, then go for it. It's not only that, but it's the complexity of these electronic systems nowadays too. I mean, there's just so much to fail. There's a part of me that thinks a more simplistic bike for a cheaper price, where if things break, it's more of a bolt-on issue, as opposed to, oh, you need a new ECM and you need a new connection for this to that, and oh, but your shocks, this and that. I don't mind the adjustability issue. I mean, it's electronic. You know, you start switching out springs and different shocks, and you create this whole new nightmare. You know, I like the idea of something more straight up and classic and tried and true, like the last generation of 1000cc sport bikes that didn't have so much dependence on electronic aids, at least for that application. You know, I almost favor the electronic aids more for the street, to be honest, because I think you're less likely to wreck the thing. Yeah, it's more dangerous in the street if you do fall, but I think the likelihood of a huge fall is probably less so. That's just my opinion. Don't flip out on that. But you know, if I could do it again, if I had a cruiser to like handle the streets and go more for these long rides, and you know, I was doing like I'm doing today, I take this bike out now just to blast around, because the Harley has obviously its own limitations, clearly, and it's fun to even use this on the street. But you know, what would I do if I had, you know, another bike to take care of the daily stuff? You know, the monotonous rides. See what I'm doing right now? I don't need this bike for this. This is ridiculous. It's driving me crazy, because a bike is built to do something very different than this. You know, what would I do? I'd probably get something that's a little more track focused, maybe a little cheaper and used. I'm gonna stick with it because I'll lose money if I actually trade it in for something, you know, even cheaper and, you know, more designed for the track. And you take into account limitations and top speed. That's not, you know, my biggest thing either way. You know, if I'm doing 150 or, you know, 170, yeah, there might be a little thrill involved, but ultimately it's not gonna change my world. But corner speed and positioning and feeling the limit of grip, that's what really kind of gets me going, and I think I can get pretty far on this bike, at least for another year or two. And I can also modify it, you know. The nice thing about this standard version is the suspension is much more amenable to modifications. All the electronic stuff is not included in the suspension, so it's just straight up mechanical. Swap out the front, you swap out the rear, tailor it to yourself, and before you know it, you have a very competent machine for the track and with adjustability for the road as well. I'm not at that point yet. So far, this bike as it is, with you know, just manual adjustments with damping and rebound, I'm my biggest limitation, not the bike. Buffalo, look at the Buffalo. Just one single Buffalo. Why would you own a single Buffalo? I don't know. It's not a petting zoo. I can't wait to get in front of this truck, but inevitably there'll be another slow weight vehicle further ahead that I'll have to deal with. Break some confidence, aspiring Kenworth. Look at that scene, guys. That's what awaits me. The curves and corners that naturally come along with that scenery. It's a beautiful thing. It really is. Yeah, I wonder if I ever would have gotten involved in motorcycles a couple of years ago if I didn't have this territory to play in. It's actually the traffic that got me going. I couldn't get to emergencies for work quickly enough. Just these roads in Los Angeles are just perpetual parking lots. You just sit there. The time was ticking. You lose your mind. So I needed to split. And it just so happened that once you get out of that congestion, you have this to play with. Just motorcycles make a lot of sense in this state, as they do in many environments. There's always just the thrill of it too, no matter where you are. Whatever crumbly little corner of earth you happen to find.